Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The Republicans' post-Trump trauma. Say that fast. Can the party incorporate some of its political positions while moving past his poisonous style? Well, that's an opinion piece posed by Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal, and it's one that is the basis of today's conversation, especially as the ouster of Liz Cheney is, complete, so to speak, at least from leadership. There's a lot going on in the Republican Party, and some are claiming, right, that this is the beginning of the end of the grand old party, or at least a substantive change that we haven't seen in a long time. Is there any merit to all of that? And what might the future of the Republican Party or any subsequent splinter parties look like? That's what we're talking about today. Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. But of course, we could not get started on a conversation about the future of the Republican Party without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
In the current state of the Republican Party, you have two options. You can either be a liege of Donald Trump, or you can be Liz Cheney and speak independently. So there's our word of the day, a liege, L-I-E-G-E. As an adjective, it means to give service or allegiance to the Lord, like a liege subject. Or as a noun, it means someone who is loyal or faithful. And that's what Donald Trump expects. And that's part of Kevin McCarthy and the Republican Party, that section wing of the Republican Party. That's what they expect. And Liz Cheney, being a very strong conservative, she voted with the president's policies over 90% of the time, but had the audacity to speak out and say, you know what, I think he needs to be impeached, and January 6th is bad for democracy. Because of that, she's had her leadership position taken from her and being threatened that she will not be reelected. So she is not a liege, but we have lieges out there with the president. And is it the right thing for the Republican Party? Is it the conservatism? And like, nobody in the Republican Party is talking about the trillions of dollars of debt that were added during the Trump years to our national debt. So what's happened to the old Republican Party?
the grand old party. Lance, Peggy Noonan, give us a little. I am many years younger, and so I don't have the benefit of your multiple decades and decades and decades of knowledge. I think I got 6 in there, right?
Well, if you pick up, I don't know, you got too many. I know that.
Well, for folks that don't know, right?
Yeah.
This is the day of recording. This is our friendly redneck liberal's birthday, and it's a big birthday because it's 6 decades on Earth, right? So that's something.
Well, I'm 6 today. That's what I'm going to tell everybody.
Okay.
I am 6 today.
Just leave off the 0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. We're not into binary stuff. So
okay.
I'm 6. But no, Peggy Noonan was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. And if you're a recent historian of the Republican Party, Ronald Reagan was kind of the face of the party for the last 40 years until Donald Trump came along, and he's kind of pushing that whole picture of what the Republican Party stands for. You know, the Republican Party in the last 40 years was the party of Reagan, and he took it because before Reagan, it was Eisenhower. So, Eisenhower and very moderate, and then Reagan took the Republican Party and made it what most people think of today as the conservative GOP. And Peggy Noonan was one of his main speechwriters, and she writes editorials for the Wall Street Journal. And so she has that point of reference now when you talk about the Republican Party of Donald Trump. She knew of and grew up under the Eisenhower Republicans, was part of the movement of the Reagan Republicans and the conservative movement. And now she's watched that party that she's worked for all those years be taken over, or an attempt to be taken over, by Donald Trump.
So she writes the following, a little bit of history here, right? that splits get resolved when somebody wins big and nationally. Eisenhower's landslides in 1952 and 56 announced to the party that it was moderate. Reagan's in 1980 and 84 revealed it was conservative. The different factions get the message and follow the winner like metal filings to a magnet. The future GOP, and the current one for that matter, is a party of conservatism with important Trumpian inflections. The great outstanding question: will those inflections be those of attitude, wildness, garish personalities, and conspiracy-mindedness? If so, the party will often lose. Or will the inflections be those of actual policy, in which case they will often win? In terms of policy, the future GOP will be more Trumpian, meaning more populist and nationalist. High spending will continue, in parentheses here, and will not much be acknowledged, exclamation point, end parentheses. But it will be high spending with a more conservative bent, more for cops, for instance. The party will be preoccupied neither by the capital gains tax nor by what's good for corporations. It won't cut entitlements.
Well, I think she's speaking to the conservative nature of what you've grown up with as the Republican Party, the party who was very patriotic, very strong, very business oriented, who wanted to balance the budget and wanted to bring down the national debt and spoke for behalf of business. And back to the Reagan time, the old trickle down economics, that if you help big business, that money will then trickle down, which he based on Eisenhower, because Eisenhower, was famous because of being the general to lead D-Day in World War II and commander of all Allied forces in Europe. And both political parties went after Eisenhower. He was not a political person. He was a military man, and he chose to be a Republican. And the Republicans hung their hat on him at a time when the budget was balanced, but it was a different tax rate. And with Eisenhower in the 50s, and he was able to balance the budget and do great things with the country. And then Reagan came along and said, okay, we're going to do that again, but we're going to do it by practicing economic conservatism, and we're going to give power back to the people, and we're going to support big business, and we're going to cut taxes, and everything's going to be all hunky-dory. And then you go through, Clinton and the Bushes, and we get to Donald Trump, who basically says, yeah, I'm not really a political party member, support Democrats and Republicans. I'm a big businessman, and I want to take over. And because I support big business, we're going to cut taxes and just look at how wonderful things are. And so she's just kind of giving a quick history of the Republican Party over the last 70 years. And so I think it's a very well-spoken, well thought out for what the Republican Party has gone through over the last 70, 75 years.
This next one I want to talk about a little bit because I think it speaks to the feelings of a lot of different people in the country right now. She writes, conservative social thinking against what used to be called political correctness, against being pushed around by faculty lounge Robespierres, will continue. It will be anti-radical on race. Republicans are and will be with Senator Tim Scott. America is not a racist country, but can always benefit from remembering that racism is a sin and a vice of the ignorant. The argument against wokeness, this last part here in particular is, I think, of note. The argument against wokeness is powerful. We are our souls and our character. We are not only our color and our country of origin. Now, Lance, that last line there sounds like a party I might be interested in being a member of. Whether or not the Republican Party is living that, not sure that they really are at the moment, particularly not under former President Trump, right? This to me is the key, and what she's talking about is there's a lot of things that she mentions here, right, about what the Republican Party could be or could choose to do, where those are things like, well, yeah, if they were actually doing those things, I might like them a lot more. They're not doing a lot of those things, or at least not with any consistency. There's these moments, right? But I guess to me, and that's an important point, is I think there are still people, and she goes on to write, But if the Republicans are serious, they have to wake up. They can't win elections without classic GOP voters. They can win with Trumpism, but they'll lose with Trump, as they just did.
Right. She's going in, and I think what she's talking about there, when you talk about the formation of a Republican Party, is she's understanding that the Republican Party is in a state of flux right now, and it can go a couple different directions. And what we're going to see, the Republican Party of 2024, is being decided upon now. And she's laying the groundwork. This is the Republican Party that I would like to see come out of this mixture of a lost presidential race, that the loser got more votes than any winner had ever gotten before. You know, the 70 some million votes that Trump received were greater than any winning president in the past. But yet he lost. And so there are some good ideas there. There are some things that we need to do, some things that we can learn from this. But she points out a little bit further in the article too, that President Trump's numbers have dropped since January 6th, and that it's probably not a good idea to hang your hat on that person.
An NBC News poll last month had only 32% of respondents with a favorable impression of Mr. Trump. More interesting, it had his numbers falling among Republicans themselves. Only 44% of them said they were more a supporter of Donald Trump than of the Republican Party. 50% said the other way around. Think about that as we go to break and as we talk about what's next. The ousting of Liz Cheney from the leadership of the Republican Party, in part because of her ongoing criticism of the former president, President Donald Trump. And what does that tell us about where things stand? Still plenty to talk about. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Support and interest of President Trump is waning, Lance. Maybe not his ideas, right, and his policies, if you can even call them his ideas, because I think a lot of them, which he acknowledged, were, borrowed from other presidents. And yeah, I mean, you can pretty much say that of anybody, right? There's not a lot of new ideas anymore on either side of the aisle. They're just different renditions of old ideas. And so I think that's part of what we've discussed so far, that we've looked at, is there may be a path forward for some of what Trump was professing to care about, and some of the policies that he was suggesting. There's probably not a path forward that's a very winning path with him at the helm of those ideas, which, again, we're just saying based on the numbers within his own party, right? I mean, we're not talking about Democrats. We're just talking about the people who are Republicans. I remember covering, Lance, just, before the election, that more Republicans identified as a supporter of Donald Trump than they did as Republicans, right? In other words, it's I'm a Republican, or I'm a Trump supporter, and then I'm a Republican. And now it's the opposite, and it is continuing to trend in that direction. I am now again a Republican, followed by a supporter of Trump.
Yeah, right. Well, it's really hard to stay in the limelight and stay in the picture when you don't have a job. When you don't have a political standing. So, I mean, the former president is trying to do what he can to keep his name out there, but it's going, we're only 5 months, from the inauguration. It's not that, long yet, and it's going to continue to get even harder for President Trump to stay a factor in the Republican Party. And so I think it's interesting, though, that his followers, the numbers have stayed the same. Even at his darkest time, he got 30%, 33% of the people followed him. And I think that's still the case. But, with Liz Cheney, she's in trouble for speaking the truth. And that's to me is the biggest problem I have, is that, okay, we want politicians to be truthful. She's been truthful, and she's getting blasted by her own party for speaking the truth. And people say,
Well, wait. Do we want politicians to be truthful?
Well,
you just said that, but I'm just like, do we really? Because it doesn't seem like it.
Apparently not with the reaction of the Republicans
toward
Liz Cheney. But I mean, it's kind of like, to your point, the reactions of Democrats to Bernie Sanders. When Bernie Sanders would say the truthful things, the Democrats didn't like Bernie Sanders. So maybe we don't, or at least the political world doesn't want them. But then, we as voters, we say we do, but then we say, well, we're not going to support Bernie Sanders and we're not going to support Liz Cheney. And they're two of the people that I'm thinking of that are out there that I think are speaking the truth. While I'm not sure I would vote for either one of them either, I wouldn't castigate them out of the party for speaking the truth. I might not vote for them because I don't agree with their ideas, like Liz Cheney voting with President Trump's policies over 90% of the time while she was in the House. I would not have done that had I been in the House, nor would I have voted with Bernie Sanders 90% of the time. So, but I do think their honesty is something that we want. I wish the people who felt the way I did on the issues would speak honestly.
Well, and it comes down to if you had somebody else who was in all the same positions on the policy, right, as Liz Cheney. You got two people running. Lance has to choose between them. He can have same policy, right? There's no difference in the policy, but Liz Cheney's over here and going to speak out against the leader of the party if she doesn't like what the leader of the party is doing or how he's acting, and this other person won't.
And Kevin McCarthy comes out and speaks against the leader of the party, and then backpedals and said, no, what I said on January 7th is not right. And I now, throw that all away and I'm going to go to the feet of the throne and kiss the ruler. Okay. If I had to vote for Liz Cheney or Kevin McCarthy, I would vote for Liz Cheney.
Right.
Because she's being honest. They vote the same way.
Right.
And I don't agree with their voting policies, but
you appreciate the honesty component. There's some level of respect for at least being willing to do.
Liz Cheney at least notices that over 60 court cases and the United States Senate and all these other places have said the election is certified and legal. Okay. Kevin, I mean, come on, folks. Anecdotally,
most of which are Republicans, right?
In this article, there were Republican judges who ruled that, there's no sign of fraud here.
Republican appointed judges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, or in some states, Republican judges.
Yeah.
Ohio has, you are aligned with a political party as a judge. But it's like, that's the truth, people. And yet, anecdotally, in this article, it talks about, well, really never has been proven as to whether or not Trump had the election stolen from him. Folks, what do you need for proof anymore? I mean, I'm just, and now I'm on my soapbox and I apologize, but it's like, whether you voted for Trump or didn't vote for Trump, I do not understand where you're getting this. Well, it hasn't been proven. How much more proof do you need? Or I guess not how much more proof. What is it that you need that would count as proof to where you would move on and say the election wasn't a fraud? What is it you're looking for? If you will tell me that, I will go out there and try to find it for you if it's possible. Because I do not understand these people who are arguing that it hasn't been proven that the election wasn't stolen from the president. I mean, other than Facebook, it's all Facebook lies. It's people who...
Okay, but...
So tell me what it is you want to see. What can we do since the 60 court cases and the Republican controlled Senate and the vice president who was a Republican, all of these things have come out and said, no, it wasn't stolen. It was a close election. The Republicans lost. They were very close to winning, but it wasn't stolen. That's just very frustrating to me. And that's why they're going against Liz Cheney, is because, she voted to impeach the president and she says the election wasn't stolen. It was fair. I didn't like it that Donald Trump won in 2016, but I didn't go around saying the election was stolen.
I just have something for you, Lance, because you said the truth, and we've talked a lot about that, right? Because well, they're not speaking the truth. Well, what's the definition of truth? Well, it's what is true. Okay. So we have to look at the definition of true. In accordance with fact or reality. Now, if we just stopped at it in accordance with fact, right?
Yeah, but we're living in an alternative reality.
But see, but this is interesting.
So that's why I said, though, what do you need? What fact or piece of evidence do you need to stop saying
there's nothing?
So then
because they don't,
that loses credence to the argument to me.
Right.
If you can't tell me, okay, so we haven't given you what you needed yet. What is it that you need? Well, there is nothing. There is
nothing that you could say or do that would convince
I want to hear them say. I want to hear them say that,
because let me give you it right on the vaccine.
Because then we can throw our hands up and say, "Yeah, you folks, we're going to write you off
on the vaccine thing."
And I hope I'm not writing off any of our listeners. But if you can't tell me what it is you need for me to be able to prove something to you, now I may not be able to find it. I may not be able to give it to you, but there ought to be something that you're looking for. It shouldn't be what you say. And that is, well, there's nothing you can give me to change my mind. Well, then what else is there to do other than to write you off? If nothing can be done to show you the truth.
We asked, when the vaccine was coming out, Lance, you and I did, we said, well, what's it going to take, right, to get people from skeptical to taking it, or from saying absolutely no to at least getting to the possibility of, well, I might do it. And we said, one of the things would be for President Trump to say that people should get the damn vaccine, right? Well, he did that. And there's a lot of people. Yeah.
Did he say that?
Yeah. Yeah.
He got the vaccine.
He did. And then he came out. Remember, it was the whole public statement and we covered it. And he said he thinks that any American that can get the vaccine should get the vaccine. And lo and behold, I brought that up to a few people and they're like, oh, well, and they just kind of, it's like they're a fish and they just kind of waddle about it and they don't say anything about it because they can't. Well, Trump did something that's the opposite of what they wanted him to do, or the opposite of what they expected him to do. So even the person that they bow down to can't give them a command that's counter to what they want him to command them to do. I hope that I'm wrong about that. I'm just saying, I think that's an interesting example because I've confronted a couple people with that and said, so, well, what do you think that Trump was lying to you, or because he said you should get it and he got it? Well, he's the guy, not some hoax. You can watch the video. He said it, and he got it. So what's your problem,
And he had COVID.
Right. Yeah, I had COVID because I've had people too. Well, I had COVID, so I don't need to go. Oh, well, he had COVID and he got the vaccine and then he told you should get it. So what's the holdup? Why don't you want to get it? And they don't know.
They don't have an answer.
And that's to your point. So I don't know what we can give them. It's almost like if Trump, stood up and commanded his people, stop following me, we don't care. We're going to do it anyway, and that's exactly, I think, what's happening with the Liz Cheney thing, because you look at, right, this whole point. And actually Peggy Noonan brings it up in her article. Listen to this. This is crazy, folks. One of the scoops of the Cheney drama was when the Washington Post reported that in a briefing at an April GOP retreat at the National Republican Congressional Committee, that it hid from its members polling information on battleground districts. That information showed that Mr. Trump's unfavorable ratings were 15 points higher than his favorable ones. Quote, nearly twice as many voters had a strongly unfavorable view of the former president as had a strongly favorable one. End quote. What? Your internal information, right? This isn't some third-party source. The Republican Party's information tells you that in battleground states, the places that you need to win, that the president is not the guy that's going to get it done for you anymore. And as the leadership of the party, you sit there and say, well, we know what the numbers say, but we just really don't care because I guess we just all love following Trump and bowing down to him. So we're going to cover up those numbers and hide them from our membership so that they don't know that the thing to do is to swear off Trump. What kind of asinine stupidity is that?
Right.
The Democrats do plenty of stupid things that cost them elections, but what the hell's that? Really?
No, you're right.
It's just crazy. It's like, in what realm of wanting to win does that make any sense at all to how you move forward? I don't know. Maybe somebody can explain it to us. Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, podcast@thestateofus.org. What's next? A third party? Maybe. We're going to talk about it. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Willard.
It wasn't but for a few months ago, Lance, where I was telling you that we were convinced, both of us, right, that the Republicans play to win. That's what they're here to do. They play to win, baby. They don't care what it takes. They win. Well, apparently they care if it comes to Trump because, doesn't matter that his favorables, right, are, that his unfavorables are twice what his favorables are. Oh, well. In battleground states, the ones that they have to win in order to win the election. Who cares? We're just going to support him and we're not going to tell anybody. So a lot of people have said, and I mean, right, a letter from 100 former, some current people in the Republican Party, a lot of them former elected representatives, are saying that they're considering the idea of a new / return to old Republican Party. Interesting that you've got people like that on the record saying that, because, we've floated the theory of it. Would that be a good thing, Lance? Would that please you to have a new conservative party that says, hey, we're going to be concerned about the deficit. We're going to be concerned about small government and returning, power to the people. And we're not going to be worried about social issues and social conservatism and populism. Those are not what we're interested in.
Well, I'm the honorary historian here at
Yes.
True Chat. So I'm just going to have to tell you.
Senior resident historian.
I don't think that the Republican Party is going away. This has happened before, as I kind of hinted at. I think this is just the evolution of the Republican Party after a very frustrating defeat in the 2020 election. I think the Republican Party will stay together. I think there's some infighting going on among the Republicans as to what direction to take the party after a loss. And there are those who want to govern like Donald Trump governed, who say, but look, he got 74 million votes. We can't abandon that style because, number one, it's our style and we're validated by 74 million people voting for our style. So we want to control the party. And then you have the more fiscal conservative wing of the Republican Party who wants to go back to the times of Ronald Reagan and say, no, this is the direction we need for the Republican Party. Trump was a one-off. He wasn't a true Republican. And yeah, it was kind of fun to rule things for a while. But we need to go back to our roots of the Reagan Republican time. And I think what you're seeing is infighting and the evolution and development of the Republican Party after a narrow defeat. So I think the Republican Party is going to come out on the other side of this and be together. I don't think we're going to splinter. I think a splintering of the party is not good. Because I don't think that those coalition governments that we've seen in European and Arab nations work very well. I don't like the coalition government style. And if you get 3, 4, 5 parties, then that's what you end up with because nobody gets a majority. Somebody gets a plurality and they're named the victor. And then they have to go and get one of the smaller groups or 2 of the smaller groups to form a coalition government. I don't think that's what makes the United States great. So I think the Republican Party is going to last. I don't think this is anything new. This is typically what happens to a party after they lose an election. And I think we're just having it being played out in front of us because of the dynamics of the whole situation. But then, what do you think? That's what that's where I am. I don't think and I don't think it would be good to have multiple parties. I just don't. I think if the Republican Party falls apart and there's a second party to replace them, but I think the American government system is a given that it would not work the same if it had multiple parties of equal strength.
Well, and historically, obviously, we have been a country that has had more than, I mean, we technically have more than one, more than two political parties right now, technically speaking. There are other political parties and they, whatever. But realistically, there's two parties that we all understand and accept are the, primary controllers, vastly the primary controllers of our democratic system of government. But there was a time in American history where there were multiple parties and they actually, some of them did stand a chance, even if it was an outside chance. But to Lance's point, that's not how it's been for a long time.
No, well, but there's never been a president who didn't come from one of the two major political parties.
Right. Just
at the time.
Evolutions of
the party.
Those parties.
Right. I mean,
well, because the Free Soil Party obviously became the Republican Party and before
but
the
Free Soilers never won the presidency.
Right.
They joined with the Republicans to challenge the Democrats. And the same with the Know Nothings. And you go back to the Federalists and
that's
the Republicans.
Why I think
it's always been a two-party system.
It's more likely, right, that as opposed to seeing I think what we might see, Lance, is a splintering, right, of the party and an attempt at a new one. And what will probably happen is they'll realize that separately they can't get anything done, so they will reform either and still call themselves Republicans, or we'll see what we've seen right historically, which is some, to your point, evolution of the party, a renaming, a rebranding.
But we'll still have two.
And we'll get back to, two that are in control. But you and I talked about this before the show. We've talked about it some, and you made the point that it was mentioned in one of these articles. And I guess I just want our listeners, if they haven't heard me explain this before, who do you think the Republicans most need, right? Is it their voters? Is it Trump? It's the Democrats, right? And it's the same thing for the Democrats. Democrats don't need other Democrats. They need Republicans.
You need a foe, right? You need an enemy.
Exactly. And us versus them, because both parties are completely...
You have to have a dinosaur to fight. You have to have a dragon to fight.
Built on the idea of being able to slay the dragon,
Defend, fair damsel.
Yes.
And put my suit of armor on. I'm protecting you from the Republicans. Right. I'm protecting you from the Democrats.
And it's a lot less exciting if there's no dragon.
Right.
And you're just out here swinging your sword, That doesn't
then
make
you're Don
for
Quixote fighting the windmills,
yes,
right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's amusing, but it's not very useful. So
people aren't going to follow you.
Right, yeah.
Other than Sancho on his faithful burro.
Okay. And we're in trouble if that's where the fate of the country lies.
I don't know. It might be amusing.
Yeah.
We could enjoy it a whole lot more than we do now.
It would be amusing. And so I guess I think it's going to be really difficult to see our way clear of a two-party system. I don't think the answer is multiple parties, nor do I think it's two parties. I think, and this is some of the encouraging data that we've been seeing, and I think there's going to be some new polling on it, the increasing number of Americans who do not identify with a party at all. Your party should be the United States of America. That's what it ought to be. Because I think what the issue, and our founding fathers, right, they predicted all this. They said, political parties are going to be the worst thing that happens to our country. And it doesn't matter if there's 1, 2, 10, 50. It doesn't matter. Parties are not, holistically, the very concept of them is problematic because their existence is not about creating a better country. A party is a self-serving entity designed to preserve and protect its own interests, not the country's, So
for those Republicans who say they want to go back to what the founding fathers wanted,
they didn't want parties.
What they're saying is they don't, what we're telling you is they didn't want political parties.
I would
the
argue,
founding fathers did not want political parties.
Yeah. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams had a great number of correspondences on their fear of descending into political division.
And Washington's
based on parties.
final farewell address, he says the same thing, that will be the death of the United States is the formation of political parties.
And so if we want to honor what they told us and what they warned us of and what we've experienced, it is to say, look, there's probably always going to be political parties, folks. But the day that you decide you're more with a party, or I think we have to add this important caveat now, a person, right? That is not what it's not what it should be about, I don't think. The sooner that we all accept that we should just use a little bit more brain power, a little bit more energy, try to look at things, common sense, right? And decide where we stand on things and forget about what the party is telling you or what some leader's telling you, right? Those are cheap, lazy ways out. And Republicans and Democrats alike both do it, right?
Yep.
Well, the Democrats said that saying this is wrong, so now, we're not going to say it anymore. What? You didn't think about if you think it's wrong, Well, the perfect example to me is the current immigration issue. Trump and the Republicans really screwed it up. Well, guess what? The Democrats have taken over and they're really screwing it up. And as an American citizen, it's like, really? You both have had a chance to lead on this and you both are doing a horrible job. So it's like, there's not a political party that I can favor on how they're dealing with immigration and how they're dealing with the children at the border and the separation of parents and because they both because
they're both messing it up, And so if you ask me, I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat when it comes to the immigration issue because neither one are doing a good job. I'll take anybody who's going to do what I think needs to be done down there, and that is to take care of these people. And we're not doing that. And we're not even getting rid of these people. So we're not doing that either. We're doing both as poorly as possible. So there's the importance of a political party. They can both screw up the same issue.
Yep.
In different ways.
And that's why I think we'd all be better, Lance, right? If we do a little bit more of what we practice here on this show. And what is that? We have a mission, right? And it informs.
Well, we're just trying to inform people, right? The mission here is we want to educate people with honest, respectful, and open conversation. I mean, and that's what we're having. I just told you, I don't like the Republicans or the Democrats on the issue of immigration. Let's do what's best for, like Justin said, let's do what's best for the country. Okay. And I don't care what political party you are. If you're doing what's best for the country, I'll vote for you. Now you say, well, what's best for the country? Well, obviously it's what I think because I'm informed. Why am I informed? Because I read and I listen. And that's what we hope you do too, is that you're listening to this show because you want to be informed. And when you're talking to your friends and they say, well, where are you getting all this information? Say, well, it's the Wall Street Journal, it's the New York Times, and it's Justin and Lance. And they say, well, what are you talking about? And so tell them that they can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is a syndicated radio program heard on the weekends in select talk markets, and we're a podcast released by 4 a.m. Eastern Time, Tuesdays and Thursdays, as Lance mentioned, everywhere podcasts are found. So please tune in and share with your friends. Send us your thoughts on today's episode. Hopefully you're doing the same. That we're hoping that's why you're here. podcast@thestateofus.org. That's how you send us an email. podcast@thestateofus.org. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.